Skip Christmas. Your life is a mess. My sister said it like she was flicking a piece of lint off her sleeve. I quietly agreed. For years. I had been testing how my family would treat me if they thought I was a failure. Then, on December 27th, the man she was hiding me from walked into my office, saw my title as Chief Executive Officer, and the lies began to burn. My name is Violet Bell. The glass walls of the conference room on the 42nd floor of the Cascadia Clinical Innovations Tower were designed to be soundproof, but they could not silence the vibration of the phone against the mahogany table. It was December 18th. The city of Seattle lay beneath us, a grid of gray rain and holiday lights, but my focus was entirely on the holographic data projection hovering in the center of the room. The predictive algorithm is showing a 98% accuracy rate for post-operative sepsis detection within the first 6 hours, I said, keeping my voice level. My team sat around me, pens scratching, tablets glowing. That is not just a statistic. That is the difference between a patient walking out of the hospital in a week or leaving in a box. We do not launch until we hit 99%. My phone buzzed again. A long, insistent vibration that rattled against a glass coaster. I glanced down. Tessa. I slid the phone face down. My sister never called during work hours unless it was a catastrophe. But then, Tessa's definition of a catastrophe usually involved a chipped nail or a wait list for a handbag. Violet, my chief technology officer, Marcus, said, drawing my attention back to the screen. If we push for 99%, we are looking at a delay in the Q1 rollout. The investors are already anxious. Let them be anxious, I replied, standing up and walking to the window. My reflection stared back at me. I saw a woman in a tailored charcoal blazer, sharp features, and eyes that had learned to hide exhaustion behind a wall of professional detachment. Vanta Pulse is my legacy. Marcus, I will not sell a half-finished shield to a surgeon. We hold the line. The meeting wrapped up 10 minutes later. As the team filed out, gathering their laptops and whispering about holiday plans, I was left alone in the silence of the executive suite. The air conditioning hummed, a low, artificial winter wind. I picked up my phone. 3 missed calls. 1 text message. Emergency regarding Christmas. Call me now. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with that old familiar exhaustion that came from being a Bell. I sat down in my leather chair, the one with the ergonomic support that cost more than my first car, and pressed the dial button. Tessa picked up on the first ring. Finally, she snapped. There was no hello. No question about how my day was going, or if I was busy running a company that was on the verge of revolutionizing post-surgical care. I have been trying to reach you for an hour. Violet? I was in a board meeting, Tessa, I said, leaning back and rubbing my temples. What is the emergency? Is Mom okay? Is Dad? They are fine. This is about the 25th. This is about Christmas dinner. I checked the digital calendar on my desk. I already bought my ticket. Tessa, I sent the confirmation to Mom last week. I land at 10 in the morning. Yeah, Tessa said, and her voice dropped an octave. It was a tone I recognized. It was the tone she used when she was about to ask for a favor that would cost me dignity. About that, we need to talk. I am listening. You need to skip it, she said. The words hung in the air, suspended like dust motes. Excuse me. Skip Christmas, she repeated, faster this time, like she was ripping off a bandage. Your life is a mess, Violet. I can't have you there. Not this year. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound that barely escaped my throat. My life is a mess, Tessa. I am literally sitting in a corner office overlooking the Space Needle. Nobody cares about your little admin job. Violet, she cut in. Look, this is serious. You know I have been seeing someone new. Grant? Dr. Grant Holloway. She said the name like it was a royal title. I have heard the name, I said neutrally. You said he is a doctor. He is not just a doctor. He is the doctor. He comes from one of those families. Violet, old money, Ivy League, the kind of people who have libraries named after them. He is perfect. And this is the first time he is meeting the parents. The first impression has to be flawless. I swiveled my chair around to look at the city again. And my presence ruins that perfection because, why exactly? Because you are you, she said, struggling for the words but not struggling hard enough to spare my feelings. I told him about you. I had to. He asked about siblings. I told him you work in hospital administration. You know, filing papers, answering phones. I told him you're struggling a bit, that you're still finding yourself. I closed my eyes. You told him I am a secretary. I made it sound noble, she insisted. But let's be real. You live in that tiny apartment downtown. You drive a 5-year-old sedan. You dress like a librarian. Grant is used to elegance. Violet, he is used to success. If you show up with your heavy energy and your complaints about rent and your whole tragic spinster vibe, it is going to ruin everything. I finally have a shot at a real future here. Do not take this away from me. My heavy energy, I repeated. Mom and Dad agree, she added, playing her ace card. My hand tightened around the phone. Put them on. They are right here. There was a shuffling sound, and then my mother's voice came through the speaker. It was softer, filled with that weaponized pity she had perfected over 3 decades. Violet, honey, I am here. Mom, Tessa says I am banned from Christmas. Oh, don't use that word. My mother sighed. It is not a ban. It is just a strategic absence. For your sister. You know how hard she has tried to find a good man. This Grant fellow. He is really something special. We just want the evening to flow smoothly. And I disrupt the flow, I said. It was not a question. You can be a little intense, dear. My father chimed in from the background. You are always so serious. Always talking about work and sad things. Tessa needs this night to be light, joyful, high status. High status, I whispered to the empty room. I looked around my office. On the wall to my left hung the Innovator of the Year award from the National MedTech Association. Beside it was a framed photograph of me shaking hands with the governor when we secured the state grant for Vantapulse. On my desk lay a contract worth $12 million that I was scheduled to sign in January. They knew none of it. For 10 years. Since I left home, I had played a game. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what I could buy them. So I never told them about the promotions. I never told them when I founded Cascadia. I kept my old apartment for when they visited. I wore simple clothes. I let them believe I was the struggling, serious, boring sister. While Tessa was the shining star who just needed a lucky break, I had built a test, and they were failing it, spectacularly. So, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tears they probably expected. You want me to stay in Seattle alone on Christmas so Tessa can pretend to be the only successful child. It is just 1 year, Tessa said, snatching the phone back. Please, Violet, if you love me, you will do this. Just stay away. Let me have my moment. I told him you were busy with inventory or something. I looked at the reflection of the woman in the glass. She looked powerful. She looked dangerous. But to the people on the phone, she was invisible. Fine, I said. The silence on the other end was heavy with shock. They had expected a fight. They had prepared for an argument, for guilt trips, for me to beg. Really? Tessa asked. Really, I said. You want a perfect Christmas. I will not stand in your way. I will cancel my flight. Oh, thank God. Tessa exhaled, and I could practically hear the tension leaving her body. You are the best. Seriously, I will make it up to you. We can do a late Christmas in January, just us girls, when the pressure is off. Sure, I said. In January. I have to go. I have a fitting for my dress. It is red velvet. Violet, you should see it. Grant is going to lose his mind. Goodbye, Tessa. Merry Christmas. I ended the call before she could say it back. The office was dead silent. I placed the phone on the desk with precise, deliberate movement. I did not throw it. I did not scream. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest, freezing over the parts of me that used to care about their approval. They wanted me to be nothing fine, I would be nothing to them. I stared at the city lights. I had no plans. My team was off. My apartment would be empty. I was the CEO of a company valued in the mid-nine figures, and I had just been uninvited from my family dinner because I was not classy enough. A knock on the door broke my trance. It was Jonah, my executive assistant. He was 24, sharp as a tack, and the only person who knew exactly how much coffee I needed to function. He looked flushed, clutching a tablet to his chest. "Violet," he said, stepping into the room, "I am so sorry to disturb you. I know you wanted to leave early today." "It is fine." "Jonah, what is it?" "We just got a confirmation from the representative of the St. Jude Providence Hospital Network," he said, his eyes wide. "They want to move forward with the acquisition talks for the Vantapulse pilot program. They want to close the deal before the fiscal year ends." I sat up straighter. This was the whale we had been hunting for 6 months. A partnership with St. Jude Providence would put our AI in 20 major hospitals across the state. It was the contract that would turn Cascadia from a successful startup into an industry standard. "That is incredible news," I said, feeling a flicker of genuine professional thrill push back the family darkness. "When do they want to meet?" "That is the tricky part," Jonah said, grimacing slightly. "The only window their lead negotiator has is during the holiday break. They are asking for a summit meeting here, in the office, on December 27th. "The 27th, I repeated. 2 days after the Christmas I was skipping. "I am available. I have nothing else on my calendar." "Great," Jonah said, tapping his screen. "I will send the calendar invite. The director of surgery is coming personally, along with their chief financial officer. They are very serious about this." "Who is the lead?" I asked, reaching for my stylus to make a note. "Who do I need to impress?" "It is their new director of surgical innovation," Jonah said, scrolling down the file. "He just transferred from Johns Hopkins, supposed to be a brilliant mind, very big on transparency and ethical tech." "Name?" I asked, looking up. "Dr. Grant Holloway." My hand froze in midair. The room seemed to tilt slightly to the left. The hum of the air conditioning roared in my ears like a jet engine. "Who?" I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Dr. Grant Holloway," Jonah repeated, oblivious to the fact that he had just dropped a bomb on my entire existence. "Do you know him?" I looked at the name on the digital file Jonah had forwarded to my screen. There was a photo attached. A man in his late 30s, square jaw, intelligent blue eyes, wearing a white coat that looked tailored. He looked kind. He looked expensive. He looked exactly like the man Tessa had described as her ticket to a better life, the man she was hiding me from, the man who thought I was a chaotic, struggling administrative assistant who ruined family gatherings with my heavy energy. And on December 27th, he was walking into my building. He was coming to my floor. He was going to sit at my table and ask me to sell him the future of medicine. A slow, cold smile touched my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a chess player who realizes their opponent has just moved their king into a trap. "No, Jonah," I said softly, looking at the man's face on my screen. "I do not know him, but I'm very much looking forward to meeting him." "Shall I prepare the full presentation?" Jonah asked. "Prepare everything," I said, standing up and smoothing the lapel of my blazer. "The full data suite, the prototype demonstration. I want the boardroom spotless. I want the best catering we can find on short notice." "Understood." "And Jonah." "Yes, Ms. Bell." "Make sure my title is on everything," I said. "Founder and Chief Executive Officer. I want it on the screen. I want it on the handouts. I want it to be the first thing he sees when he walks through those doors." "Of course," Jonah said, looking slightly confused by the sudden intensity but nodding nonetheless. He left the room, the glass door clicking shut behind him. I walked back to the window. The rain was falling harder now, blurring the lights of Seattle into streaks of gold and red. "Skip Christmas. Your life is a mess." "Okay, Tessa," I whispered to the reflection in the glass. "I will skip Christmas. I placed my hand against the cold window pane. But you are going to wish you had let me come to dinner. The silence in my office was usually my favorite sound. It was the sound of decisions made, of crises averted, of a machine running perfectly. But tonight, staring at the rain streaking against the glass, the silence felt heavy with the ghosts of my childhood. The call with Tessa and my parents had unearthed a sediment of memories I usually kept buried under layers of work and ambition. It was not just about Christmas. It never was. It was about the roles we had been assigned before we even knew how to speak. Growing up, the script was written in permanent ink. Tessa was the star. She was the sunlight, the social butterfly, the one who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they had been waiting just for her. She had a gift for it. I would admit that. She knew how to laugh at the right volume. She knew how to touch someone's arm to make them feel special. My parents called it emotional intelligence. They called it knowing how to live. I was the counterweight. I was the anchor that dragged the balloon down. They called me dry. They called me eccentric. When I was 12, while Tessa was practicing cheerleading routines in the living room, I was in the corner reading about the circulatory system. My father would look at me over his newspaper, shaking his head with a mix of confusion and disappointment. "Violet, why so serious?" he would ask. "You look like you are solving a murder. Go outside. Be a kid." But I did not want to be a kid. I wanted to understand how things worked. I wanted to know why things broke. To them, my intensity was a flaw. It was a social liability. They paraded Tessa around at dinner parties like a trophy, her charm a reflection of their good parenting. I was the one they had to explain away. "Violet is just very focused," my mother would say, her smile tight, apologizing for my existence before I had even opened my mouth. That dynamic never really ended. It just evolved. When I moved out, I made a choice. It was a calculated, strategic decision, the kind I make in business every day. I decided to hide. I did not hide my body or my location. I hid my success. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in a perfectly average neighborhood. It has beige carpet that is slightly worn in the hallway. The countertops are laminate, peeling slightly at the edges. The view is of a brick wall and a fire escape. I drive a reliable, 5-year-old sedan that blends into traffic like a drop of water in the ocean. I could buy the building. I could buy the entire block. But I keep this apartment as a control group in an experiment that has been running for 10 years. I needed to know. I needed to know if my family loved me for who I was, or if they would only love me for what I could give them. If I showed up in a Porsche, wearing Italian silk, dropping hints about my stock options, their attitude would change instantly. I know this. Tessa would stop calling me a mess and start calling me her inspiration. My parents would stop apologizing for me and start bragging about me. But that is not love. That is transaction. So I gave them the Violet they expected, the struggling administrator, the one who counts pennies, and in return, they gave me the truth. They gave me their pity, their condescension, and now, their exclusion. They think I am hiding because I am ashamed of my mediocrity. They do not realize I am hiding because I am protecting myself from their greed. I turned away from the window and walked to the wall of monitors on the far side of my office. I tapped a key, and the screens woke up, flooding the room with the cool blue light of Vantapulse. My family thinks I do data entry. They think I shuffle papers in a basement. The reality is that Vantapulse is the most advanced post-operative monitoring system in the world. My journey here did not start with a desire for wealth. It started in a hospital room 7 years ago. I was 25, working as a junior analyst for a different firm, and I had a mentor. His name was Arthur. He was brilliant, kind, the sort of man who remembered your birthday and the name of your cat. He went in for a routine gallbladder surgery, low risk, standard procedure. I visited him 2 days later. He was joking, laughing, complaining about the hospital food. He looked fine. The nurses checked his vitals every 4 hours. His chart looked normal, but inside his body, a microscopic leak had started. Sepsis was blooming in his blood like a dark flower. By the time the standard monitors picked up the spike in his temperature and the drop in his blood pressure, it was too late. I watched the crash team rush in. I watched the panic. I watched a man who was alive and joking at noon turn into a corpse by sunset. It broke something in me. But it also built something. I spent the next month obsessing over his charts. I pulled the raw data, and I saw it. The signs were there. 12 hours before he crashed, there were subtle deviations in his heart rate variability, tiny fluctuations in his oxygen saturation that were statistically insignificant to a human nurse on a 12-hour shift, but mathematically glaring if you knew how to look. A machine would have seen it. An algorithm would have screamed. That was the birth of Vantapulse. I realized that a minute earlier can be a life. 10 minutes earlier is a miracle. 12 hours earlier is a cure. I poured everything I had into this company. I ate ramen for 3 years. I slept under my desk. I hired the best data scientists in the country and told them we were not building software. We were building a guardian. Now, Vantapulse monitors 40,000 beds across the country, every day. My system flags a patient who looks fine but is actually dying. Every day, a nurse gets an alert, checks a patient, and stops a tragedy before it happens. I tried to tell my parents once. It was 3 years ago. Right after we got our first round of major funding, we were at Thanksgiving dinner. I am doing really exciting work, I had said, trying to catch my father's eye. I am building a medical technology platform. It uses AI to predict complications. My father had nodded, carving the turkey. That is nice, honey. Computers are very important in hospitals these days. Someone has to keep the records straight. No, I corrected him. I'm not keeping records. I am building the system. It is my company. Pass the gravy, please, Tessa had interrupted. Dad, did I tell you Grant took me to that winery in Napa? The one where the bottle costs $500. $500, my mother gasped, her eyes lighting up. Oh, Tessa, that is so fancy. And just like that, my company, my life's work, was swept off the table like crumbs. They heard medical and technology, and their brains translated it to its support. They did not want to hear it. It did not fit the box they had built for me. Violet is the worker bee. Violet is the background noise. So I stopped trying. I let them believe what they wanted. And now, the irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. They were ashamed of me. They wanted to hide the hospital administrator from Dr. Grant Holloway because he was high class. They wanted to protect his delicate sensibilities from my failure. They had no idea that the man they were groveling to, the man Tessa was pinning all her hopes on, was coming to my office in 2 days to beg for a license to use my technology. Dr. Holloway was a surgeon. He knew the stats. He knew that without Vantapulse, his hospital's post-operative mortality rates were lagging behind the national average. He wasn't coming to Seattle during the holidays to see the Space Needle. He was coming because his career depended on modernizing his department, and I held the keys to the kingdom. I walked back to my desk and picked up the file regarding the St. Jude Providence deal. I looked at Holloway's resume again. He was impressive. Double board certified, published researcher. He had a reputation for being rigorous and demanding. Tessa had described him as old money and dignified, implying he was superficial, but his work suggested a man who cared about outcomes. Would he recognize me? Tessa said she had told him about me, but she had told him I was a mess. She had painted a caricature. When he walks into this office, he will be expecting a mouse. Instead, he's going to meet a lion. I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was not about revenge. I told myself that firmly. I am not a vindictive person. I do not do drama. I solve problems. Revenge would be crashing their Christmas dinner and throwing champagne in Tessa's face. That is messy. That is emotional. What was about to happen was simply physics. It was the law of cause and effect. Tessa had built a relationship on a foundation of lies. She had lied about me to make herself look better. She had lied to me to keep me away. She was trying to curate a reality that did not exist. I was not going to attack her. I was not going to call Grant Holloway and expose her. I was simply going to do my job. I was going to sit in my chair, wear my suit, and sign the contract that would save thousands of lives. If the truth destroyed Tessa's little fantasy world in the process, that was not my fault. That was gravity. I sat down and opened my personal email. There was an automated reminder, flight to parents, December 25th. I clicked cancel booking. The screen asked, "Are you sure you want to cancel?" "Yes," I said aloud. I was done auditioning for the role of the beloved daughter. I was done shrinking myself to fit into their frame. I thought about the young man I had seen in the hospital cafeteria last week. He was sitting by his mother's bed, holding her hand while the Vantapulse monitor hummed quietly in the background. The system had caught a pulmonary embolism 6 hours before it became fatal. They were laughing. They were going to have another Christmas together because I decided to be serious, because I decided to be dry and obsessive. That was enough. That had to be enough. My family could have their perfect, curated, lie-filled dinner. They could toast to a future that was built on smoke. I would spend Christmas alone in my apartment. I would order takeout. I would review the data logs, and I would prepare for the 27th. I looked at the calendar on the wall. The date was circled in red ink. December 27th. The day the two halves of my life would finally collide. "You wanted to impress him, Tessa," I whispered into the quiet room. "You wanted him to see success. Be careful what you wish for." I turned off the lights in the office, leaving only the glow of the city outside. I walked to the elevator, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I was Violet Bell. I was the CEO of Cascadia Clinical Innovations. And for the first time in my life, I was absolutely fine with being the one who was too serious for the party, because the party was over, and the real work was about to begin. December 24th arrived not with sleigh bells, but with the persistent, gray drizzle typical of a Seattle winter. I sat in the corner of my living room, the only light coming from the screen of my phone. The apartment was quiet. I had not bought a tree. There were no stockings on the wall. The air smelled faintly of the rain outside, and the expensive Pinot Noir I had just poured into a glass. I opened social media. I knew I should not. It was a form of emotional self-harm, like pressing on a bruise to see if it still hurt. But I had to know what the perfect Christmas looked like, and there it was, top of the feed. Tessa had posted a photo 5 minutes ago. The setting was my parents' living room in the suburbs. The fireplace was roaring, casting a warm golden glow over the scene. The tree was a masterpiece of silver and gold ornaments, towering in the background. In the center stood my family, arranged like figures in a department store window display. My mother wore her best pearls, her hand resting possessively on my father's arm. My father looked proud, holding a crystal tumbler of scotch. And there, front and center, was Tessa. She was wearing the red velvet dress she had mentioned on the phone. It was tight, off the shoulder, dramatic. She looked beautiful. I could not deny that. She looked like the heroine of a Hallmark movie. But my eyes were drawn to the man standing next to her. Dr. Grant Holloway. He looked exactly like his file photo, but warmer. He was wearing a dark cashmere sweater over a collared shirt, relaxed but undeniably expensive. His arm was around Tessa's waist, and he was smiling at something my father was saying. He looked comfortable. He looked like he belonged. He looked like the son-in-law they had been praying for since Tessa turned 25. The caption read, "Christmas done right, so grateful for love, family, and new beginnings. Blessed power, couple family goals." I scrolled down to the comments. This was where the real story was told. My Aunt Linda had written, finally, "Tessa, you two look like royalty. So glad to see the family doing so well." A cousin I had not spoken to in 3 years added, "Wow, he is handsome, upgrading the gene pool." "It is nice to see everyone looking so successful." My mother's best friend commented, "A perfect match. 2 successful people building a life. Proud of you all." I scanned the photo again. I scanned the caption. I scanned every single comment. There was not a single mention of me. I was not missed. I was not away for work. I simply did not exist in their narrative. The Bell family consisted of 2 loving parents and 1 shining, successful daughter. My absence was not a hole. It was a correction. They had edited me out of the picture to make the composition cleaner. I took a screenshot. I did not do it out of rage. I did not do it to send to anyone. I did it because I knew that in a few days, when the gaslighting began, when they tried to tell me that I was crazy or oversensitive, I would need proof. I needed to remind myself that this moment happened. I needed to remember that while I was sitting alone in the dark, they were toasting to a version of reality where I was nothing. I locked my phone and set it face down on the table. "Enough," I said to the empty room. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and grabbed my coat. I was not going to spend Christmas Eve wallowing. I had a different kind of family to see. I took a cab to a small, upscale Italian restaurant downtown. We had rented out the back room. It was not a party in the traditional sense, no DJ, no dancing, but the atmosphere was warm. About 15 members of my core team were there. These were the people who had built Vantapulse with me. They were data scientists, neurologists, coders, and system architects. Many of them had families they could have been with, but we were in the middle of a critical monitoring period for the holiday rush, and they had chosen to stay near the command center. "Violet," Marcus called out as I entered, raising a glass of red wine. We were just debating the ethics of giving the algorithm a name. I say we call it HAL, but apparently that tests poorly with focus groups. I laughed, the sound genuine and unforced. "No, HAL. Marcus, we want patients to feel safe, not like they are being watched by a sentient murder bot." I sat down at the head of the long table. The conversation flowed easily. It was intelligent, sharp, and void of the passive-aggressive jockeying that defined dinners at my parents' house. Here, nobody cared about my shoes or my relationship status. They cared about the latency speed of the new server updates. They cared about the data. I looked around the table. Jonah was there, looking exhausted but happy, showing pictures of his new puppy to the lead engineer. Sarah, our head of clinical trials, was explaining a complex cardiac procedure to one of the interns using breadsticks as props. This was my reality. These people respected me. They did not need me to pretend to be smaller so they could feel bigger. Midway through the risotto, my watch buzzed. It was a priority notification from the Vantapulse secure app. I glanced at it, and the world seemed to stop for a second. It was a message from the chief of medicine at a partner hospital in Chicago. "Update patient in bed 402, post-op coronary bypass. Vitals looked stable on standard monitors. Your system flagged a subtle arrhythmia pattern and a drop in perfusion 40 minutes ago. We intervened, found a clot forming. Patient is stable. You just saved a father of 3. Merry Christmas." I stared at the text. A father of 3. He was going to wake up tomorrow morning because of the code we wrote. He was going to watch his children open presents because I was obsessive and serious. "Everything okay, boss?" Jonah asked, noticing my silence. I looked up, tears pricking the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from a fierce, overwhelming pride. "Yes, Jonah, everything is perfect." I showed him the message. He read it, and a grin spread across his face. He passed the phone to Marcus, and it went down the line. A quiet ripple of satisfaction moved through the room. We did not need champagne toasts or Instagram likes. We had this, but the night could not stay purely celebratory. As dessert was being served, tiramisu that dissolved on the tongue. Jonah slid into the chair next to me. His expression had shifted from festive to professional. "I hate to bring this up tonight," he said, keeping his voice low so the others would not hear. "But I just got the final attendee list for the 27th from Dr. Holloway's assistant." "Give it to me," I said, putting down my spoon. "It is not just a meet and greet, Violet," Jonah said, pulling up the email on his phone. "Holloway is bringing the heavy artillery. He has got the chief of surgery, Dr. Eris Thorne, and he is bringing the hospital network's chief financial officer, Linda Greaves." I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. Linda Greaves was legendary in the industry. She was known as the guillotine because of how quickly she cut funding to projects she deemed risky. If Holloway was bringing her, it meant he wasn't just interested in the tech, he was ready to buy, but only if the numbers were bulletproof. And, Jonah added, hesitating, they requested a full audit of our liability structures. They want to know everything. If we mess this up, if we stumble even a little bit on the 27th, word will get out that we aren't ready for the big leagues. It could kill the Q1 momentum entirely. We will not stumble, I said, though my heart rate had kicked up a notch. Dr. Holloway also sent a personal note, Jonah said. He said he values radical transparency and that he has been burned by vendors overpromising before. He wants to look us in the eye and know exactly who he is dealing with. Radical transparency. The irony was thick enough to choke on. The man who demanded absolute truth in business was currently dating a woman who had built an entire relationship on a fabrication. He was going to walk into my office expecting clarity, and he was going to find out that his personal life was a fog of lies. He will get his transparency, I said, my voice hardening. I looked at the date on my watch. It was almost midnight. Christmas Day was minutes away. In the suburbs, Tessa was probably unwrapping a designer bag, basking in the glow of her deception. My parents were probably patting themselves on the back for managing the Violet problem so smoothly. They thought they had successfully quarantined the mess. They did not understand that they had not isolated the infection. They had just locked themselves in with the carrier. The meeting on the 27th was no longer just a business transaction. It was a collision point. It was the intersection where two parallel lines, my hidden success and Tessa's public lies, were finally going to crash. I realized then that I had to be perfect, not just for the contract, not just for the company, but for the cosmic balance of it all. If I lost my temper, if I acted like the crazy sister, Tessa would win. If I was emotional, if I cried, if I made a scene, I would validate every lie she had told him. I had to be ice. I had to be steel. I looked at Jonah. Cancel my morning off tomorrow. I want to run the simulation again. I want to be ready for any question Greaves throws at us. And I want the background check on Holloway's hospital protocols on my desk by 8 in the morning. On Christmas Day, Jonah asked, raising an eyebrow. We are saving lives. Jonah, I said, standing up and putting on my coat. Disease does not take a holiday, neither do we. I walked out of the restaurant and into the rainy night. The city was quiet. I thought about the text from the Chicago hospital. You just saved a father of 3. That was real. The photo on Instagram, the red dress, the smiles, the blessed that was a performance. Let them have their performance. Let them have their one night of perfect lighting and curated angles. Because on December 27th, the lights in my conference room would be bright, unforgiving, and fluorescent, and under those lights, no amount of filtering would be able to hide the truth. I hailed a cab. To the office, I told the driver. On Christmas Eve, lady? He asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. Yes, I said, leaning back and watching the city blur by. I have a very important meeting to prepare for. I pulled up the screenshot of my family one last time. I looked at Tessa's triumphant smile. Enjoy it, sister. I thought, it is the last peaceful Christmas you are going to have for a very long time. December 26th felt less like the day after Christmas and more like the deep breath before a plunge into freezing water. The city was still sleepy, recovering from the holiday, but the 42nd floor of the Cascadia Tower was vibrating with controlled kinetic energy. I stood at the head of the conference table. The room was darkened, lit only by the massive wall of screens displaying the Vantapulse interface. My core team Marcus, Sarah, and the lead system architects sat in a semicircle. They looked tired, likely fueling themselves on leftover holiday adrenaline and strong espresso, but their eyes were sharp. Run the 72-hour post-op simulation again, I commanded. I want to see the stress markers. Marcus tapped his keyboard. On the screen, a digital avatar of a human body appeared. It was a phantom patient, built from terabytes of aggregate data from real cases. Subject is a 55-year-old male, Marcus narrated, his voice steady. Underwent a bowel resection 4 hours ago. Standard vitals are green. Heart rate is 80. Oxygen saturation is 98%. I watched the lines on the graph. To the naked eye, to a nurse checking a chart at 3 in the morning, this patient was fine. Introduce the sepsis variable, I said. The screen flickered. A tiny red line began to deviate from the baseline. Pathogen introduced, Sarah said. Standard monitors are still reading normal, but Vantapulse is picking up a microtremor in the heart rate variability and a 0.4-degree rise in core temperature. Alert time, I asked. System triggers a yellow warning at hour 6, Marcus replied. By hour 8, it upgrades to red. Standard care protocols would not catch this until hour 18, when fever spikes. That is a 12-hour lead, I said, leaning forward. That is the difference between antibiotics and a funeral, but the interface is too cluttered. Dr. Holloway is a surgeon, not a data scientist. Clean up the dashboard. I want the time-saved metric front and center. He needs to see the value in seconds, not in code. I walked around the table, making eye contact with every member of my team. Listen to me, I said, my voice low and serious. Tomorrow is not just a sales pitch. We are being audited by the best. Dr. Holloway and his team are going to look for cracks. They are going to look for glitches. If the system lags, we lose. If the data is messy, we lose. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. I know it is the holidays. I know you should be home with your families. But what we are building here matters more than a turkey dinner. No one lets their personal life bleed into this room tomorrow. We are professionals. We are the best in the industry. Let's prove it. They nodded. There was no grumbling. They knew what was at stake. I left them to refine the dashboard and retreated to my office to handle the second part of my preparation, the part that had nothing to do with code and everything to do with the man who was currently dating my sister. I pulled up the dossier I had asked Jonah to compile on Dr. Grant Holloway. It was thick. Jonah had done his job well. I skipped past the medical accolades. I already knew he was a double board-certified genius. I was looking for the man, not the doctor. I found an interview he had given to a medical ethics journal 2 years ago. The headline read, "The Scalpel of Truth, Why Transparency is the Only Cure." I began to read, and a cold chill went down my spine. In the operating room, Holloway had said in the interview, "A lie is a murder weapon. If a resident hides a mistake, a patient dies. If a vendor exaggerates the capability of a device, a patient dies. I have zero tolerance for fabrication. I would rather work with a mediocre surgeon who is honest than a brilliant one who hides the truth. Integrity is the only currency that matters to me." I sat back in my chair. This was the man Tessa was trying to trap. My sister, whose entire life was a carefully curated exhibit of half-truths and exaggerations, was sleeping next to a man who viewed dishonesty as a mortal sin. She had told him I was a mess to make herself look like the stable one. She had invented a version of her family to fit his standards. She was playing with fire, and she had no idea that the room was filled with gasoline. I felt a strange mixture of pity and inevitability. Tessa thought she was securing her future. In reality, she was building a house on a fault line. Jonah knocked on the doorframe, interrupting my thoughts. "Violet, I have an update from the hospital's procurement department." "Come in," I said. Closing the dossier, Jonah walked in, looking a little frantic. "Okay, so the pressure just dialed up. I spoke to their admin. Apparently, the hospital network has a surplus in their capital expenditure budget for this fiscal year, about $15 million. And if they do not spend it by December 31st, they lose it for next year. They are not just coming to kick the tires. Violet, they are coming with a checkbook. If they like what they see tomorrow, they want to sign immediately so the funds clear before the new year." I let out a slow breath. "So, it is an immediate deployment." "Yes," Jonah said. "They want a pilot program in 3 hospitals starting January 5th. That means we need legal, compliance, and integration teams ready to go on Monday." "We can do it," I said instantly. "We have the infrastructure." "It also means," Jonah added, that Dr. Holloway is going to be incredibly thorough. He cannot afford to spend $15 million on a lemon. He is going to grill you. Violet, let him grill me, I said. I am fireproof. Jonah hesitated. Are you sure you are okay? You have been intense, even for you. Did something happen over Christmas? I looked at Jonah. He was a good kid. He cared, but I could not tell him that my own family had erased me from their holiday photos. I could not tell him that the lead negotiator coming tomorrow was the man my sister was lying to. I just want this contract. Jonah, I said softly. I want Vanta Pulse to be the standard. I want to stop reading about preventable deaths in the newspaper. We will get it, Jonah said confidently. I will go double-check the catering. No gluten, low sodium, just like you asked. Thank you, Jonah. When he left, I turned back to my computer. I had one last thing to prepare. My opening statement. Usually, I winged these. I knew my product inside and out, but tomorrow needed to be precise. I needed to introduce myself in a way that bridged the gap between the mess Tessa had described and the CEO standing in front of him. I typed why Vantapulse. I stared at the blinking cursor. I thought about Arthur, my mentor who died. I thought about the thousands of patients who were just numbers on a spreadsheet to the hospital administration, but who were fathers, mothers, and children to someone else. I typed, I built this because I believe that human error is inevitable, but tragedy does not have to be. I am not a doctor. I do not save lives with my hands. I save them with the truth. The data does not lie. It does not care about your reputation. It does not care about your budget. It only tells you what is happening, right now, while there is still time to fix it. I paused. The truth. That was the theme. I realized then that I had a choice to make about tomorrow. I could be vindictive. I could drop hints. I could make passive-aggressive comments about my sister Tessa and watch Holloway's face crumble. I could burn her world down with a single sentence. But that was what the messy Violet would do. That was what the bitter, unsuccessful sister would do. The CEO of Cascadia Clinical Innovations did not engage in petty family squabbles. She did not need to. I made a decision right then. I would not attack Tessa. I would not volunteer information about her lies. I would not bring up the Christmas dinner. However, I would not lie. If he asked if I had a sister, I would say yes. If he asked her name, I would say Tessa. If he asked why he had never heard of my company from her, I would tell him the truth that my family and my business were separate worlds. I would simply stand in the light. If Tessa's lies could not survive the glare, that was her problem. I looked at the clock. It was 7 p.m. The office was quiet again. My team had gone home to rest for the big day. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window one last time. The reflection stared back at me. I looked tired, but I looked strong. The blazer sat perfectly on my shoulders. My hair was pulled back in a sharp, no-nonsense bun. I was not the girl who got left out of photos. I was not the disappointment. I opened my digital calendar. The entry for December 27th occupied the entire day block. 09:00 a.m. St. Jude Providence Delegation. Lead Dr. Grant Holloway. I hovered the mouse over the lock event button. Clicking it felt final, like turning the key in a missile silo. Once I did this, there was no going back. The collision was set. My finger pressed down. The event turned a solid, immutable dark blue. Ready or not, I whispered to the city below. The wind howled against the glass, a low, mournful sound. But inside, the air was still. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a storm front just before the sky cracks open. I picked up my bag. I turned off the lights. I walked out of the office, leaving the door unlocked for the morning. Tomorrow, the man who hated liars was going to meet the truth, and I had a feeling that by lunchtime, my sister's perfect life was going to look very different. The morning of December 27th was razor sharp. The sky over Seattle was a sheet of unbroken steel, and the air was cold enough to bite through wool. Inside the Cascadia Tower, the atmosphere was sterile and precise. The conference room was set. Pitchers of water sweated on the table. Notepads were aligned with military discipline. My team stood in a flank formation, Marcus to my left, Sarah to my right, Jonah hovering near the door with the tablet that controlled the room's environment. I wore a suit of midnight blue, tailored to look less like clothing and more like armor. My heels made no sound on the thick carpet as I paced the length of the window. "They are in the elevator," Jonah announced, his voice tight. "ETA, 30 seconds. I stopped pacing. I turned to face the double glass doors. My heart did not race. It slowed down. It was the physiological response of a predator entering the tall grass. "Remember," I said to my team, not looking at them, "we are not selling. We are solving. Let them come to us." The doors slid open. The delegation from St. Jude Providence entered like a weather front. They were a phalanx of charcoal suits and white coats. Leading them was a woman I recognized instantly. Linda Greaves, the CFO. She looked like she could balance a budget just by glaring at it. Next to her was Dr. Aris Thorne, the chief of surgery, a man whose reputation was as large as the hospital he ran. And then, stepping out from behind them, was Dr. Grant Holloway. He was taller than he looked in photos. He moved with the easy, fluid confidence of a man who spent his life holding scalpels inside living bodies. He was wearing a navy suit that likely cost more than my first car, and his eyes were scanning the room with a practiced, critical intelligence. He was smiling as he shook hands with Marcus, then Sarah. He was charming. He was professional. He was the perfect boyfriend from the Christmas photo. Then he reached me. He extended his hand, his eyes moving from my shoulder to my face. "And you must be—" His voice stopped. It did not fade. It was severed. His hand was still extended, hovering in the air between us. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a microsecond, the professional mask slipped. I saw confusion. I saw a rapid mental calculation that failed to produce an answer. It was the look of a man seeing a ghost, or perhaps seeing a glitch in the matrix. I took his hand. His grip was firm but frozen. "I am Violet Bell," I said, my voice cool and clear, carrying to the back of the room. "Founder and CEO of Vantapulse. Welcome to Cascadia." He didn't let go immediately. He stared at me, his blue eyes widening slightly. "Bell," he repeated, the word tasting strange in his mouth. "Yes, Bell." I withdrew my hand gently, breaking the contact. Dr. Thorne, the chief of surgery, stepped forward, oblivious to the tension radiating off his colleague. "Ms. Bell, it is an honor," he boomed, shaking my hand vigorously. "I have been following your white papers on predictive sepsis algorithms for 2 years. The work you are doing is fascinating." "Thank you. Dr. Thorne," I said, turning my attention to the senior man. "We believe the data speaks for itself. We are eager to show you the new latency protocols." I gestured for everyone to sit. The shuffling of chairs and the clicking of briefcases filled the silence. I walked to the head of the table. I could feel Holloway's eyes on me. They were burning into the side of my face. He sat down slowly, like a man lowering himself into a bath of ice water. He leaned over to Dr. Thorne, whispering something. Thorne nodded, pointing at the screen. Holloway looked back at me. He looked at the nameplate in front of my seat. Violet Bell, CEO. I cleared my throat. "Before we begin the demonstration, I want to clarify our objective. We are not looking for a vendor relationship. We are looking for a clinical partnership. Vantapulse is designed to be an extension of your surgical team, not a replacement." I clicked the remote. The screen behind me flared to life, displaying the real-time monitoring of 40,000 beds across the country. It was a galaxy of data points, a living, breathing map of human survival. "Impressive scale," Linda Greaves noted, her pen hovering over her notebook. "But scale implies cost. What is your implementation overhead?" "Zero for hardware," I answered instantly. "We integrate with your existing telemetry. The cost is purely licensing and server capacity. We can have 3 hospitals live in 48 hours. Greaves raised an eyebrow. 48 hours. That is ambitious. "It is tested," I said. We did it in Chicago last month. The presentation continued. For 40 minutes. I was not a sister. I was not a daughter. I was a machine. I fielded technical questions from Thorne, financial probes from Greaves, and integration queries from their IT director. I was flawless. I knew every number, every decimal point. Holloway stayed silent. He sat there, his hands clasped on the table, watching me. He was listening, but I could tell his mind was running a parallel process, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the story he had been told. Finally, we reached the QA session. The clinical utility is clear, Dr. Thorne said, leaning back. But adoption is always the hurdle. Surgeons are creatures of habit. They trust people, not boxes. They need to know the leadership behind the tech understands the human element. He looked at me with a fatherly curiosity. You are based here in Seattle, correct? Ms. Bell. Yes, I said. Cascadia was founded here. Do you have roots here? Thorne asked, making polite small talk while he organized his papers. Family in the area. The room went quiet. It was a standard question, the kind used to build rapport in business meetings. But in this room, it was a grenade. I looked at Holloway. He had stopped breathing. His eyes were wide, pleading, terrified of the answer. I did not blink. Yes, I said calmly. My parents live in the suburbs, and my sister lives here in the city. The word sister hung in the air. Holloway's face drained of color. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He leaned forward, his voice low, almost a whisper, ignoring the other people in the room. Your sister, he said. Her name is Tessa? The other executives looked at him, confused by the sudden intensity of the question. I met his gaze. I did not smile. I did not frown. I gave him the radical transparency he claimed to value. Yes, I said. Her name is Tessa. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. Linda Greaves looked from me to Holloway and back again. She was sharp. She sensed something personal had just breached the boardroom. Small world, she murmured, though her tone suggested she knew it was more than that. Holloway sat back in his chair. He looked physically ill. He was putting it together. The puzzle pieces were slamming into place. Tessa's messy sister, the hospital administrator, the failure, the one who was too embarrassing to be invited to Christmas dinner. She was the woman standing at the head of the table. She was the woman holding the $15 million contract he needed to sign. He looked at the screen, at the complex algorithms that were saving lives. Then he looked at me. He saw the suit. He saw the command I held over the room. He saw the respect his boss, Dr. Thorne, was giving me, and he realized that everything he had been told for the last 3 months was a lie. Dr. Holloway, I asked, my voice polite but cutting. Do you have any questions about the data? He blinked, struggling to find his voice. He looked at his notepad. His hands were shaking slightly. No, he rasped. He cleared his throat and tried again. No, the data looks sound. Excellent, I said. Then let's talk about the pilot program. I moved the meeting forward, ignoring his collapse. I turned to Greaves and started discussing payment structures. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw Holloway pull out his phone under the table. He stared at the screen for a long moment, probably looking at a text from Tessa, or perhaps that Christmas photo. He put the phone away face down. The movement was angry. He looked up at me again. This time, the confusion was gone. It was replaced by a deep, dawning horror. He wasn't just embarrassed. He felt betrayed. He had walked into this room thinking he was the superior being, the savior coming to evaluate a vendor. He realized now that he was the one who had been played, and the woman he had been told to pity was the only one in the room who was actually telling the truth. Ms. Bell, Holloway said suddenly, interrupting Greaves. His voice was stronger now, edged with a desperate need to understand. This platform Vantapulse. You built this. From scratch. I founded the company 5 years ago. Doctor, I said. I wrote the core code myself after witnessing a preventable death from sepsis. 5 years, he repeated. So during the time your family says you were finding yourself, he was fishing. He was begging me to confirm the lie, or to explain it. I have been here, I said simply. Building this, my family has their own perspective on my career. We don't discuss business. It was a graceful answer. It protected his dignity in front of his boss. It didn't throw my family under the bus explicitly, but to him, it was devastating. It confirmed that the disconnect wasn't mine, it was theirs. I see, he said. I see. He looked down at the contract in front of him. The name Violet Bell was printed at the bottom in bold letters. He realized then that the mess Tessa had warned him about was the most competent person he had met all year. And the woman he was dating was a liar who had erased her own sister to make herself look better. The meeting ended 30 minutes later. Handshakes were exchanged. The deal was essentially done. Greaves was happy with the numbers, and Thorne was sold on the science. As the group moved toward the door, Holloway lingered. He let the others exit first. He stood by the door, looking at me. The arrogant confidence he had walked in with was gone. He looked humbled. He looked shaken. "Ms. Bell," he said. "Dr. Holloway." He opened his mouth to say something, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to ask how this was possible, but the words failed him. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't sound insane. "Sorry, my girlfriend told me you were a loser." He just nodded, a stiff, jerky motion. "We will be in touch regarding the final signatures," I said. "Yes," he said. "We will." He walked out. The glass doors slid shut. I stood alone in the conference room. My team was high-fiving in the hallway, celebrating the successful pitch. I walked to the window and looked down. I saw the group walking out of the building and getting into a black SUV. I saw Holloway stop on the sidewalk. He didn't get in immediately. He pulled out his phone again and made a call. He looked furious. I watched him pace for a moment, gesturing with his free hand. Before getting into the car, I turned back to the empty room. The nameplate on the table still read Violet Bell, CEO. The first domino had fallen, and the sound it made was louder than thunder. The presentation ended with the kind of polite, shuffling noise that usually signals a success. My team, Marcus, Sarah, and the others were beaming as they packed up their laptops. They knew we had nailed it. The metrics were undeniable, and the financial model was sound. To them, this was just another high-stakes win in a year full of them. But as the room emptied, the air grew heavy. Dr. Aris Thorne shook my hand one last time, praising the latency speeds, and Linda Greaves gave me a curt nod of approval before heading for the elevators. They walked out, chatting about budget allocations, assuming their lead negotiator was right behind them. He was not. Dr. Grant Holloway stood by the mahogany table, his hand resting on the back of a leather chair as if he needed it for balance. He waited until the glass doors clicked shut, sealing the two of us inside the soundproof aquarium of my conference room. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I moved to the side table to pour a glass of water, my movements deliberate. I was not going to break the silence. That was his job. He was the one who had entered my office with a head full of lies. "Violet," he said. His voice cracked slightly on the first syllable, a stark contrast to the baritone authority he had commanded an hour ago. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Ms. Bell, do you have a moment?" I turned to face him. He looked wrecked. The confident, polished surgeon who had walked in expecting to intimidate a vendor was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he had just woken up in a stranger's house. His face was pale, and there was a tightness around his eyes that spoke of profound humiliation. "I have 5 minutes before my next call." "Dr. Holloway," I said, leaning against the counter, "is there a question about the integration timeline?" He flinched at the formality. No, it is not about the timeline." He walked over to the window, staring out at the gray Seattle skyline, unable to look me in the eye. "She told me you were unstable," he said. The words came out in a rush, as if he needed to expel them to breathe. "Tessa, she told me you were emotionally fragile, that you drifted from job to job. She said you worked in hospital administration because you couldn't handle the pressure of the corporate world." I took a sip of water. the cool liquid grounding me. I see. She said you were difficult, he continued, turning to face me. His eyes were searching mine, looking for the person he had been warned about, and failing to find her. She told me you had a chip on your shoulder about the family, that you were jealous of her success. She said God. She said you were not a fit for my family. I raised an eyebrow. Not a fit. My family is demanding, he admitted, a flush creeping up his neck. Traditional. Tessa told me she was worried that if you came to Christmas, you would make a scene, that you would embarrass yourself. She said she was protecting you. I set the glass down. The sound of the coaster hitting the table was sharp. Protecting me, I repeated flatly, by telling you I am a failure. I know how it sounds, he said, running a hand through his hair. But you have to understand. She was so convincing. She had details. She talked about how she tried to help you get interviews. She talked about how she lent you money for rent. I almost laughed. The idea of Tessa, who regularly overdrew her credit cards, lending me money was rich. Dr. Holloway, I said, stepping forward, look around this office. Look at the view. Look at the contract on the table worth $15 million. Does it look like I need rent money? He shook his head slowly. No, it does not. Then ask yourself a simple question, I said, keeping my voice low and even. Does it make sense for someone to invent an entire tragic backstory for their own sister? Does it seem logical to destroy a sibling's reputation just to secure a boyfriend? He looked at me, and I saw the pain of realization in his eyes. He was a smart man. He dealt in logic and diagnosis. He was finally looking at the symptoms and seeing the disease. It was never about you. Was it? He whispered. It was about her. She needed to be the successful one. If you are this, he gestured to the office, to the awards on the wall, then she is not the star anymore. Tessa has always preferred a good story over a boring truth, I said. And I have always preferred to let her have her spotlight. I never thought she would use my silence to weaponize my identity against me. Holloway looked down at his hands. I felt it. That is the worst part. I felt something was off. When she described you, it felt rehearsed, but I ignored it. I wanted to believe her because everything else seemed perfect. He paused, and then his expression darkened. A memory seemed to surface, something that bothered him more than the insults. There is something else, he said. Last month, when I was stressing about the hospital's tech audit, Tessa told me not to worry. She said she understood the industry. She told me she had consulted on a major AI project in the past. She implied it was a family venture. She made it sound like she was the creative force behind a medical startup. I froze. Calling me a mess was one thing. That was personal. That was just sisterly cruelty. But claiming credit for my work, claiming to have a hand in Vantapulse, that crossed a line. That was professional theft. She said that... I asked, my voice dropping a few degrees. She didn't name the company, Holloway clarified. She just said she gave critical user experience feedback that saved the launch. She acted like she was the silent partner in a big tech success. I walked over to my desk. Come here, Grant. I used his first name intentionally. I needed him to step out of his role as a doctor and into the role of a witness. He walked over, standing behind my chair. I opened my archived emails and searched for Tessa's name. I scrolled back 3 years, to the early days of Vantapulse, when I was still seeking seed funding. Read this, I said, pointing to an email dated November 2021. The subject line was, Hey sis, weird question. Holloway leaned in and read the text aloud. Violet, are you still doing that computer medical thing? I am at a mixer and there is a guy here from TechCrunch. Send me that slide deck you showed Mom. I want to sound smart. Maybe I can hook you up. Also, can I borrow your black heels? I clicked on my reply. No. Tessa, this is proprietary. Please do not discuss Vantapulse with anyone. And her response? Whatever. You are so paranoid. Nobody cares about your boring code anyway. Have fun being poor. Holloway stared at the screen. The date stamp, the tone, the dismissal. It was all there. She didn't consult, I said, turning to look at him. She didn't advise. She mocked it. She called it boring, and now that it is worth hundreds of millions, she is using it as a prop to impress you. Holloway straightened up. His face was hard now. The confusion had evaporated, replaced by a cold, simmering anger. He was a man who built his career on precision and honesty. He had just realized he was sleeping with a fraud. She stole your valor, he said. She took your work, your struggle, and she wore it like a costume. She tried to, I corrected. But the thing about technology, doctor, is that it leaves a trail. You cannot fake code, and you cannot fake character. I closed the laptop. I keep my life separate for a reason. I told him. I do not need my family's validation. I do not need their applause. But I will not allow them to rewrite my history to suit their narrative. I am a professional. I will not let this affect our contract. But I will also not help you maintain the illusion that she is perfect. Holloway looked at me with a new kind of respect. It was not the respect of a buyer for a seller. It was the respect of one survivor recognizing another. I am so sorry, he said. About Christmas. I sat there at that table, eating your mother's food, listening to them talk about how troubled you were. I participated in it. I let them erase you. You didn't know, I said. You were given a data set that was corrupted. You acted on bad information. That is a diagnostic error, not a moral failing. It feels like a moral failing, he said bitterly. I prided myself on seeing people clearly, and I missed this completely. He checked his watch, but it was a reflexive gesture. He wasn't worried about the time. He was worried about what he had to do next. I have to go, he said. We have a dinner reservation tonight, the Four Seasons. A celebration? I asked. It was supposed to be, he said. But I cannot do it. I cannot sit there and drink wine and listen to her lie about her day. I cannot build a life on a foundation that does not exist. He looked at the door. I am going to end it. Tonight. I nodded. I did not tell him what to do. It was not my place. But I knew that for a man like Grant Holloway, once the truth was revealed, there was no going back. He could not unknow that I was the CEO. He could not unhear the lies. That is your decision, I said. He turned back to me one last time. Thank you, Violet, for the presentation and for the reality check. It was painful, but I needed it. Dr. Holloway, I said as he reached for the handle. He stopped. You came here today for your patients, I said. You came here because you want to save lives. Keep your focus on that. The contract, the technology that is real, that is what matters. Do not let the personal mess taint the professional good we can do. I looked him dead in the eye. You are a doctor. Your first duty is to do no harm, but your second duty is to the truth. Do not let your patients become victims of a lie just because you are afraid of a difficult conversation. He held my gaze for a long second. He nodded, once, sharply. I won't, he said. He walked out. I watched him go. He walked differently than he had when he arrived. He was heavier, burdened by the truth, but he was walking in a straight line. I sat down in my chair and exhaled, a long, shaky breath that I had been holding for an hour. My hands were trembling slightly. It wasn't fear, it was the adrenaline crash. I picked up my phone. There was a text from Tessa, sent 20 minutes ago. Hope you are having a boring day at the office. Grant is probably finalizing a huge deal right now. He is such a shark. Love you. I looked at the message. I looked at the smiley face emoji. I did not reply. There was no need to reply. The shark was coming home, but not with a deal for her. He was coming home with the truth. And for Tessa, that was going to be far more dangerous than any shark. The sun had set hours ago, leaving Seattle wrapped in a cloak of indigo rain. I was back in my apartment, the one with the beige carpet and the peeling laminate that my sister so despised. I sat on my second-hand sofa, a glass of water in my hand, watching the digital clock on the microwave tick forward. 7:30. Grant Holloway would have arrived at the restaurant by 7. He would have sat down. He would have ordered a drink, and by 7:15, he would have started talking. I did not have to wait long for the shockwave to hit. At 7:42, my phone lit up. It did not just ring, it convulsed on the coffee table, buzzing with a violence that felt personal. The screen flashed Tessa in bright, demanding letters. I took a breath, centering myself. I had negotiated a $15 million contract today. I had faced down a boardroom of skeptics. I could handle a phone call. I slid the icon to answer and put it on speaker. "Hello, Tessa? What game are you playing?" Her voice was a shriek, distorted by bad reception and pure, unfiltered panic. "He says you are a CEO. He says you own Cascadia. What is this? Is this some kind of sick joke you hired an actor for?" "It is not a joke, Tessa," I said, keeping my voice level. "And I am not playing a game. Dr. Holloway came to my office to evaluate a medical technology platform. I happen to be the one who built it." "Bullshit!" she screamed. I could hear background noise cars honking. Wind. She was outside. She must have stormed out of the restaurant. "You are an admin. You work in filing. You told us that—" "I never told you that," I corrected her. "You told yourselves that. I told you I worked in medical technology. You filled in the blanks with what you wanted to believe." "But you live in a dump," she yelled. "I have been to your apartment, Violet. It smells like old soup and poverty. You drive a car that barely starts. People with money do not live like that. It is impossible." "I live simply because I want to," I said. "I put my money into my company. I put it into my research. You measure success by what you wear. I measure it by what I build. We have different metrics." "You are lying," she sobbed, the anger cracking into desperation. "Grant is in there right now breaking up with me. He says I am a liar. He says I tried to steal your intellectual property. How could you do this to me? How could you let him think that—" "I did not let him think anything," I said. "I showed him the emails. Tessa, the ones where you called my work boring, the ones where you mocked me for being poor. I just gave him the context you left out. You set me up." Suddenly, there was a scuffling sound, and a different voice came on the line. It was my mother, Violet. Her voice was trembling, but it wasn't with sympathy. It was with that specific tone of offended dignity she used when a waiter brought her the wrong wine. "Violet, are you there?" "I am here, Mom. Your father and I are in the car with Tessa," she said. "She called us to pick her up. She is hysterical. Violet, what have you done? Why is this man saying these terrible things about your sister?" "He is saying them because they are true, Mom." "And why are we hearing about this company of yours from a stranger?" My father's voice boomed from the background. He sounded hurt, deeply wounded in his ego. "If you are some big-shot CEO, why didn't you say something? Why did you let us worry about you? We have spent years losing sleep over your lack of direction." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced. It was almost art. "Dad," I said, 3 years ago at Thanksgiving, I tried to show you the prototype. You told me to stop playing with computers and pass the gravy. 2 years ago, when I got the state grant, I sent you the article. You never opened the link. You asked me if the grant money was enough to fix my car." "We didn't know it was serious," my mother interjected. "You are always so quiet, Violet. You never explain things well. You cannot blame us for misunderstanding when you are so secretive." "I wasn't secretive," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I was invisible. There is a difference. You didn't want to see a CEO daughter. You wanted a backdrop for Tessa. You needed me to be the failure so she could be the success." "That is a cruel thing to say," my mother snapped. "We love you both equally. We just know Tessa has more of a flair for the world. We thought you needed help. And now that you know I don't need help," I asked, "are you proud? Or are you just embarrassed that you bet on the wrong horse?" There was a silence on the other end. It was a heavy, guilty silence. They were stunned not just by the money, but by the power dynamic shift. The daughter they pitied was suddenly the one holding the cards, and they hated it. "You ruined my life," Tessa's voice came back, tearing through the silence. She had snatched the phone again. Grant was the one. Violet. He was perfect. He was going to take care of me. We were going to get married in the spring. I had the venue picked out. And you walked into that room today and deliberately humiliated me. I did my job. Tessa, I said coldly. He came to my office. I didn't invite him. You sent him there. You pushed him toward my company because you wanted to look connected. You walked him right into the truth. You could have lied, she shrieked. If you loved me, you would have lied. You could have told him you were just an employee. You could have pretended for 1 hour. But no, you had to be the big shot. You had to show off. Show off. I laughed, a harsh sound. Tessa, I just signed a contract that will save thousands of lives. Do you think I should have jeopardized that? Jeopardized my professional integrity? Just to keep your boyfriend from finding out you are a narcissist? I am not a narcissist. I am your sister. You are supposed to have my back. Like you had mine on Christmas, I asked. Like you had mine when you told him I was a mess. When you told our parents to uninvite me because I wasn't classy enough. That was for your own good, Tessa argued, her logic twisting into knots. I didn't want you to feel bad about yourself next to him. I was sparing your feelings. No, I said, you were sparing your image. And today, the image shattered. That is not my fault. That is gravity. He dumped me. Violet. She was sobbing now. Deep, ugly sobs. He looked at me like I was garbage. He said he couldn't trust a single word out of my mouth. He said if I could lie about my own sister, I could lie about anything. Do you know what that feels like? To have someone look at you with total disgust. Yes, I said quietly. I know exactly what that feels like. I felt it when I looked at your Christmas photo. I felt it when you told me to skip the holiday because my life was a mess. I hate you, she whispered. The sobbing stopped. Her voice went dead cold. I hate you, Violet. You think you won because you have money, you have nothing, you are cold, and you are hard, and you will always be alone. I hate you. My hand tightened on the phone. The words stung, but they didn't bleed. They hit a layer of scar tissue that had been building for years. I know, I said. You hate me because I stopped playing the role you wrote for me. But Tessa, I am not the villain in your story. I am just the reality check you postponed for too long. Don't ever call me again, she spat. I won't have to. I said, Grant has the contract. The legal team has the data. My business with your lies is finished. Mom, hang up on her, Tessa screamed in the background. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and placed it gently on the cushion beside me. The apartment was silent again. The refrigerator hummed. A car drove by outside, tires splashing on the wet pavement. I sat there for a long time, listening to the beat of my own heart. It was steady. I checked my internal weather. Was I sad a little? It is always sad to watch a burning building, even if you know it was condemned years ago. Was I guilty? I searched myself for guilt. I looked for that familiar pang that usually accompanied any interaction with my family. The feeling that I should have done more, given more, been less of a burden. It wasn't there. For the first time in 30 years, the guilt was gone. In its place was a clarity as sharp as a diamond. I had told them the truth. I had lived my life with integrity. I had built something real, and they hated me for it because my reality exposed their fiction. Tessa's I hate you wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a declaration of war. She wouldn't stop here. She wouldn't just cry and move on. She was embarrassed. She was dumped, and she was likely terrified of losing her social standing. A person like Tessa, cornered and exposed, does not seek redemption. She seeks revenge. I stood up and walked to the window. My reflection ghosted against the dark glass, a woman in a simple sweater, holding a glass of water. Looking out at a city she helped keep alive. Round 1, I whispered to myself. I took a sip of water. Bring on round 2. I went to my desk and opened my laptop. I didn't go to social media. I didn't check my email. I opened the security protocols for Vantapulse. If Tessa was going to lash out, she wouldn't just throw insults. She would try to throw mud. And since she now knew the source of my strength was my company, that is where she would aim. I changed my passwords. I set up two-factor authentication on every personal account. I flagged my HR director to be on the lookout for suspicious inquiries. My parents had asked why I didn't tell them. The answer was simple: because information is ammunition. And tonight, they had proven that they would fire at me the moment they had a clear shot. I was not a daughter tonight. I was a CEO protecting her assets, and my family had just become a hostile entity. I closed the laptop and turned off the lamp. The darkness felt protective, not lonely. I had skipped Christmas. I had skipped the family drama. But now, the drama had come to my door. I was ready. The morning of December 28th did not bring clarity. It brought a PR nightmare. I had slept for perhaps 3 hours. When I walked into the Cascadia Tower at 7 in the morning, the lobby was quiet, but the atmosphere on the 42nd floor was vibrating with a different frequency than the day before. Yesterday had been about the tension of the deal. Today, the tension was messy. It was sticky. Jonah met me at the elevator doors. He wasn't holding a coffee. He was holding a tablet, and his face was pale. "Don't go into the break room," he said, stepping in front of me to block my path. "And don't look at your personal phone." "Too late for the second one," I said, walking past him toward my office. I saw the notifications on the drive over. Tessa had not spent the night crying into her pillow. She had spent it launching a guerrilla war. It started on Instagram. At 2 in the morning, she had posted a black screen with white text. No names, just heavy implications. It is funny how money changes people. You think you know your own blood, but then you realize they have been hoarding wealth while watching you struggle. Some people use their success to lift family up. Others use it to control and humiliate. Heartbroken by the cruelty of those closest to me, it was a masterpiece of victimhood, vague enough to avoid libel, specific enough to spark gossip. "It is getting traction," Jonah said, following me into my office. "She has tagged it with things like toxic family and betrayal, and Violet the cousins are reposting it." I sat down and opened my desktop. I pulled up the family group chat, which I had muted but not left. It was a war zone. "Aunt Linda, I cannot believe Violet would do this. Testing the family. That is psychopathic. Cousin Mark. Wait, so she is actually rich, like rich, and she let Grandma drive that beat-up Honda until she died. That is cold. My mother. We are all just in shock. We thought we knew her. Turns out she was laughing at us the whole time. Poor Tessa is devastated. They had successfully spun the narrative. I wasn't the hard-working daughter who had been excluded. I was the undercover millionaire who had maliciously tested their love. They had turned my privacy into a weapon against them. "Let them talk," I said, closing the window. "Gossip doesn't breach contracts. Did legal send over the final draft for the St. Jude Providence deal?" Jonah hesitated. He looked at the floor, then at me. "That is the other thing. We had an inquiry this morning, not from the hospital." "Who?" "From a journalist at the Seattle Star, the gossip column. Someone tipped them off that the CEO of Cascadia has a secret scandal involving a family feud and a stolen billion-dollar idea." I felt a cold tightness in my chest. "Stolen. The tipster claims to be an anonymous source close to the family," Jonah said. "They are trying to sell a story that Vantapulse wasn't a solo invention. They are implying that the concept was developed during family brainstorming sessions and that you cut your partner out." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless bark. Family brainstorming sessions. The only thing my family ever brainstormed was where to go for brunch. "I know," Jonah said. "But the journalist is asking for comment, and we received a letter." He placed a piece of paper on my desk. It was a printed email, sent to our general legal inquiry box at 4 in the morning. The sender was justiceforcreators123@gmail.com. I read the text. "To the Board of Cascadia Clinical Innovations. It has come to light that the intellectual property known as Vantapulse relies on core concepts developed by a third party who has not been compensated. This third party provided crucial user experience feedback and conceptual framework during the early stages of development. We demand an immediate meeting to discuss equity distribution before litigation becomes necessary. The language was trying to sound legal, but the syntax was pure Tessa. She used phrases like crucial user experience feedback, the exact same phrase Holloway told me she had used with him. She is insane, I whispered. She actually thinks that because she told me my pitch deck was boring 3 years ago, she is a co-founder. It is clumsy, Jonah noted. But if she goes to the press with a lawsuit, even a frivolous one, it could spook the hospital network. Linda Greaves hates risk. A dispute over IP ownership is a massive red flag. I stood up. The sadness I had felt the night before was gone, replaced by the cold, hard clarity of a CEO protecting her shareholders. Get Elena from legal up here, I ordered. Now. 10 minutes later, Elena, our general counsel, was sitting where Holloway had sat yesterday. She was a sharp woman with glasses and zero patience for nonsense. It is extortion, Elena said flatly, reading the email. Amateur hour, but you are right. We need to kill it before it gets oxygen. Do we have any exposure? Did she ever actually work for you, even as a contractor? Never, I said. She has never stepped foot in this building until, well, she has never seen the code. Did you ever send her files? Elena asked. Anything? A draft? A memo? I paused. I sent a pitch deck to my mother 3 years ago, just a PDF. Tessa might have seen it. I will run a forensic search on the server, Elena said. We need to know exactly what she has. If she is claiming ownership, she might try to produce a document to the press. Do it, I said. Scan everything, search for any external transfers to the Bell family email addresses. While Elena worked, I sat in my office, watching the rain. My phone buzzed again. It was Grant Holloway. I hadn't expected to hear from him. I assumed he would want to wash his hands of the entire Bell clan. Grant, I am sorry to bother you. I know you are busy, but I saw her Instagram. I wanted you to know I am not buying it. I stared at the screen. I typed back, thank you. It is a messy morning. 3 dots appeared. He was typing, then stopping, then typing again. Grant, there is something else. I debated telling you, but after seeing her post about hoarding wealth, I think you need to know the context. Violet. What context, Grant? A few weeks ago, we were looking at houses, expensive houses, way out of my budget. I told her we couldn't afford it. She told me not to worry. She said that once we were married, her family was going to invest heavily in my research. She said there was a family trust that she controlled. I stopped breathing for a second. A family trust. Grant? She made it sound like she had access to millions. Violet. She was leveraging your money. Money she didn't even know for sure you had, but suspected to keep me interested. She promised me funding for my stroke research if I put a ring on her finger. I let the phone drop to the desk. The puzzle was finally complete. It wasn't just about status. It wasn't just about being the pretty one. Tessa had been using me as a ghost bank. She had sensed I had money. Maybe she saw a receipt once, or noticed the quality of a gift, and she had built a financial house of cards on the assumption that she could bully or guilt me into paying for it eventually. She wasn't just gaslighting me. She was embezzling a future she hadn't earned. Violet. Elena's voice cut through the fog. She was looking at her laptop, her expression grim. We found something, she said. I walked over to the conference table. It is from 2 years ago, Elena said, turning the screen toward me. Outgoing email from your account, but you didn't send it from your device. The IP address matches a residential connection in the suburbs. I looked at the log. Sender Violet, Bell at Cascadia, com recipient Tessa, Bell at Gmail, com, attachment VP, clinical / roadmap internal, V2, PDF. The date, I said, squinting at the screen. November 24th, Thanksgiving. You were at your parents' house. Elena asked. Yes, I said, the memory sharpening. I left my laptop open in the living room while I helped Mom in the kitchen. Tessa was working on the couch. She forwarded a confidential internal roadmap to herself. Elena said, "It is stamped with a do not distribute watermark. It outlines the 3-year rollout plan for the AI. She stole it," I said. "She didn't consult. She stole a trade secret." "And here's the kicker," Elena said, typing a few more keys. "We cross-referenced her email address with our competitor logs. 6 months ago, someone from a generic Gmail account approached MedCore Solutions offering insider info on Vantapulse's algorithm. They didn't bite, but the subject line matches the file name she stole." The room went silent. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was corporate espionage. Tessa had stolen a confidential document 2 years ago, kept it in her back pocket, and tried to sell it to a competitor when she needed cash. And now, she was using her possession of that information to claim she was a co-founder. "She walked right into a trap," Elena said, closing the laptop. "If she tries to show that document to a journalist to prove she was involved, she is admitting to possessing stolen property. She committed a felony. Violet." I walked back to the window. I looked at the gray city. I thought about the sister who used to braid my hair when we were 5. I thought about the sister who called me a mess. I thought about the sister who promised her boyfriend my money. "She thinks this is a PR war," I said softly. "She thinks we are going to fight on Instagram." "What do you want to do?" Elena asked. "We can send a cease and desist, or we can file a police report for theft of trade secrets." I thought about my parents. If I filed a police report, Tessa would go to jail, or at least, she would face a criminal trial. It would destroy her. It would destroy the family. But if I did nothing, she would keep escalating. She would leak the roadmap. She would poison the St. Jude deal. She would tell the world I was a thief. Tessa had chosen to attack my reputation. She had chosen to attack my company. She had made this transactional. "I am not going to play her game," I said, turning back to Elena. "I am not going to argue with her on Facebook, and I am not going to send a polite warning. So, draft a formal legal complaint," I said. "Misappropriation of trade secrets, defamation, and attempted extortion. Attach the server logs showing the unauthorized transfer from my laptop. Attach the log of her attempt to sell to MedCore." "You want to file it?" Elena asked, raising an eyebrow. "That is the nuclear option." "No," I said. "Not yet. Draft it, put it on the official letterhead, and send a courier to my parents' house." "To your parents?" "Yes," I said. "Tessa is staying there. I want it delivered to her hand, along with a letter from me." "What will the letter say?" I looked at the water stain on the table where Grant Holloway's glass had sat yesterday. "It will say that she has 24 hours to retract every statement, delete every post, and sign a non-disclosure agreement. If she refuses, or if she posts one more lie, we file the charges." I paused. "And tell her that the family trust she promised Dr. Holloway does not exist, but the prison sentence for industrial espionage is very real." Elena nodded. "I will have it ready in an hour." And Elena, "Yes, boss. Make sure the courier arrives during lunch," I said. "I want my parents to see it." Elena left the room. I sat alone. I felt a strange vibration in my hand. I looked down. I was clenching my fist so hard my knuckles were white. I wasn't angry anymore. I was efficient. Tessa wanted a successful sister. She wanted a powerful CEO in the family. Fine. She was about to find out exactly how a CEO handles a liability. I picked up my phone and texted Grant back. "Violet, thank you for telling me. I am handling it. You won't be dragged into this." He replied instantly, "I am not worried about me. Watch your back. Violet. She is desperate." Violet. "I know, but she brought a rumor to a lawsuit fight." I put the phone down and turned back to my screens. The Vantapulse dashboard was glowing, green and steady, thousands of hearts beating in rhythm. It was a clean, logical system. My family was a mess, but I was done cleaning it up. I was about to excise the infection. The drive to my parents' house in the suburbs was a journey backward in time. I passed the high school where I had eaten lunch alone in the library. I passed the mall where Tessa had first been scouted for a local modeling gig that never went anywhere. Every corner held a memory of being the other sister, the background character in the Tessa Bell show. But today, the script was being rewritten. I pulled my sedan into the driveway. My father's car was there, polished and gleaming. My mother's garden was perfectly manicured, winter pansies shivering in the cold wind. It looked like a postcard of suburban success. I grabbed the heavy leather portfolio from the passenger seat. It contained no Christmas gifts, no peace offerings. It contained facts. When I walked in, the atmosphere was funereal. My parents were sitting at the dining room table, looking aged and bewildered. Tessa was not in the room, but her presence hung heavy in the air. The scent of her expensive perfume was everywhere. "Violet," my mother said, standing up halfway and then sinking back down. She looked tired. "Thank you for coming. We need to fix this." "I agree," I said, placing the portfolio on the table. "We do." "Good," my father said, leaning forward. He looked relieved, mistaking my resolve for capitulation. "Tessa is upstairs. She is a wreck. Violet, she hasn't eaten. This misunderstanding with Dr. Holloway, it has gone too far." "It is not a misunderstanding, Dad," I said, taking a seat opposite them. "And I am not here to patch things up with Grant for her." "But you have to," my mother pleaded, her hands fluttering nervously. "You are the only one he will listen to right now. If you just call him, if you just tell him that Tessa tends to exaggerate, that she meant well, he might take her back. Think of your sister's future. Think of the family." "I am thinking of the family," I said. "That is why I am here, to set a boundary. I will not be removed from this family again, and I will not allow my name to be used as a stepping stone for Tessa's ambitions." "Oh, stop being so dramatic," my father snapped, his patience fraying. "She borrowed a slide deck, so what sisters share things? Why do you have to make it a federal case? You have done well for yourself, clearly. Why can't you just let her have a little credit? It doesn't hurt you." "It does hurt me," I said. "But that is not the point. The point is that you are asking me to endorse a lie." I opened the portfolio. "I want you to look at this," I said. I laid out the documents one by one, forming a grid on the polished wood table. "This," I pointed to the first sheet, "is a log of text messages Tessa sent to her friends 3 months ago. In them, she calls me a social liability and jokes about how she is going to hide the embarrassing sister to land the doctor." My mother looked away. "People vent, Violet. This," I pointed to the second sheet, "is a screenshot of the email she sent to Grant's assistant, claiming to be the creative consultant for Cascadia. She has good ideas," my father muttered, though he looked less sure. "And this," I said, laying down a bank statement, "is the reason I am really here." My parents stared at the paper. It was a transfer log. "What is this?" my father asked, squinting. "The Horizon Trust. That is the fund that manages our supplemental pension." "Yes," I said. 3 years ago, when Dad retired early because of his back, you were worried about the mortgage. You were worried about maintaining this house. Then, miraculously, the Horizon Trust approved a monthly grant for community leaders. We were lucky," my mother said defensively. "We qualified for a program." "There is no program," I said quietly. The room went dead silent. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked loudly. "What, Ma?" my father whispered. "I am the Horizon Trust," I said. "I set it up 5 years ago when Vantapulse started turning a profit. I funnel $3,000 a month into your accounts. I paid off the last $40,000 of the mortgage. I paid for the new roof last year." My mother's face went slack. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. My father looked at the bank statement, then at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and shame. "You," he rasped, "but you drive that old car. You live in that apartment." I live there because I put my money here, I said, gesturing to the house around us. I knew that if I gave you the cash directly, it would become a dynamic. You would feel guilty, or you would feel entitled, or Tessa would want a cut, so I did it anonymously. I wanted you to be secure. I wanted you to be happy. I leaned forward, my voice trembling slightly for the first time. The daughter you called a mess has been paying your bills for 3 years. The daughter you tried to hide from the rich doctor is the reason you can afford to host Christmas dinner. My mother began to cry, not the manipulative tears she used on the phone, but real, horrified tears. She covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Violet, we didn't know," my father stammered. We thought you were struggling." "You thought I was struggling because it made it easier to praise Tessa," I said. "If I was the failure, she could be the star." "But I never minded being the failure. Dad, I minded being unloved." "We love you," my mother wailed. "Do you," I asked, "or do you love the idea of a perfect family? Because when I didn't fit the picture, you cropped me out." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps thundered on the stairs. "Liar!" Tessa burst into the room. She looked manic. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes red and puffy, and she was wearing a silk robe that I knew cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "She is lying," Tessa screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She is manipulating you. She probably printed that bank statement off the internet. She is trying to buy your love because she knows she has no personality." "Tessa, stop," my father said, his voice weak. He was still staring at the document that showed I had paid for his roof. "I won't stop," Tessa shrieked. "She comes in here with her suit and her folders and tries to act like she is the savior. She is jealous. She has always been jealous of me. She sabotaged my relationship with Grant because she couldn't stand seeing me happy." She lunged toward the table, grabbing the papers and scattering them. "You are toxic," she yelled at me. "You are the reason this family is broken. You think money makes you better than us." "The front door is unlocked." The voice came from the hallway. It was deep, calm, and terrifyingly cold. Tessa froze. We all turned. Dr. Grant Holloway was standing in the archway of the dining room. He was wearing a raincoat, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. He held a small box of Tessa's things in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. "Grant," Tessa whispered, her face transforming instantly. She smoothed her hair, her posture shifting from aggressive to fragile. "Grant, baby, you came back. I knew you would. She is lying to them. Grant, she is telling them crazy things." Holloway didn't look at her. He looked at me, giving me a brief nod of acknowledgement. Then he looked at my parents. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said politely. The door was open. I came to return Tessa's belongings, and to deliver this. He walked to the table and placed the manila envelope down on top of the scattered papers. "What is that?" Tessa asked, her voice trembling. "Violet told you about the text messages," Holloway said, his eyes finally locking onto Tessa. "And she told you about the email to my assistant, but she didn't tell you the rest, probably because she was trying to protect you from a felony charge." "Felony?" my father asked, standing up. "Now see here, doctor, this is a family dispute." "It is not a family dispute," Holloway cut him off. "It is corporate espionage." He tapped the envelope. "I made some calls last night," Holloway said. "I have a friend on the board of MedCore Solutions. I asked him if anyone had ever approached them with data from Vantapulse." Tessa's face went gray. She took a step back, bumping into the china cabinet. The glass rattled. "He sent me the log," Holloway continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "6 months ago, an email from a generic account offering proprietary algorithmic architecture for $50,000. The attachment was a file called Vantapulse Internal Roadmap. The metadata on the file shows it was created by Violet Bell and stolen from a laptop at this address." He looked at Tessa with a look of pure disgust. "You didn't just lie about your job. Tessa, You tried to sell your sister's life work to her direct competitor for the price of a mid-range sedan. My parents were paralyzed. They looked from Grant to Tessa, waiting for her to deny it, waiting for her to laugh and say it was a mistake. But Tessa didn't deny it. Her face twisted, the fragility vanished, the mask of the victim fell away, revealing something sharp and ugly underneath. "So what?" she spat. The words hung in the air like smoke. "So what?" my father repeated, horrified. "I deserve it." Tessa screamed, her voice cracking. "I deserve a cut. I am the one who had to deal with everything while she was locked away in her room being a nerd. I am the one who made this family look good. I am the one who brought energy and life into this house." She turned on me, her eyes wild. "You have millions," she yelled. "Millions. And you give them what? $3,000 a month. You are sitting on a gold mine, and you let me struggle with credit card debt. You let me beg for money for clothes." "You are 32 years old, Tessa," I said calmly. "I am the Bell family brand," she insisted, her logic completely detached from reality. "I am the one people like. If you have a company, it is because you came from us. That idea belongs to this family. It belongs to me as much as it belongs to you. I just wanted my fair share." Fair share. I stood up. I was taller than her in my heels. I looked down at her. "You tried to sell the roadmap to a competitor," I said. "Do you know what happens if Medcor had bought that? They would have filed a patent block. They would have tied Vantapulse up in court for years. We would have lost the funding. The company would have collapsed." I stepped closer to her. "You didn't want a share of the harvest, Tessa. You tried to chop down the tree and sell the wood for firewood." "I just wanted money," she sobbed, but it was angry sobbing now. "Why do you get to have it all? It is not fair." "I have it because I built it," I said. "And you don't have it because you have spent your entire life thinking the world owes you a living just for showing up and smiling." I turned to my parents. They were sitting in silence, looking at Tessa as if they had never really seen her before. For 30 years, they had seen the charming, pretty girl. Now, they saw the greed. They saw the entitlement that they had watered and fed every time they told her she was special and I was difficult. "She tried to destroy your company," my father asked, his voice shaking. "She tried to steal from you." "Yes, Dad," I said. "And she did it while living under the roof I paid for." My father put his head in his hands. My mother was weeping silently, looking at the table. Tessa looked around the room. She realized she had lost the audience. She realized the narrative had flipped so violently she could not spin it back. "You are all against me," she hissed. "Grant, please. You know I love you. I did it for us. I needed the money so we could be equals." "We were never equals, Tessa," Grant said coldly. "Not because of money, but because of this." He gestured to the room, to the lies, to the wreckage. He turned to me. "I am leaving. Violet, if you need a witness for the legal proceedings, you have my number." "Thank you, Grant," I said. He walked out the front door, closing it firmly behind him. The sound was final. Tessa stood in the center of the room, vibrating with rage. She looked at me with pure hatred. "You win," she whispered. "Are you happy you took my boyfriend? You turned Mom and Dad against me. You are a witch." "I didn't take anything, Tessa," I said, picking up my portfolio. "I just turned on the lights." I looked at my parents. "I am going to leave the trust active," I said, "because I do not punish people with poverty. That is not who I am. But from this moment on, I am not the messy sister. I am Violet Bell. And if Tessa ever tries to contact my partners, or my press team, or claims ownership of my work again, I will not send a lawyer. I will send the police." My father looked up. He looked old. "Violet, stay. Please, let's talk." "We have talked enough," I said. "You have a lot to think about. Mostly about which daughter you actually know." I walked past Tessa. She didn't move. She stood there, staring at the wall, trapped in the ruins of her own entitlement. I walked out into the cold winter air. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking. I got into my car and didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening inside. The silence of a truth that had arrived 30 years too late. The morning of December 29th was not defined by the weather or the holiday lull, but by the sterile, terrifying precision of a legal proceeding. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table in Boardroom A. This was not the room where we held creative brainstorms. This was the room where we handled acquisitions, mergers, and today, the neutralization of a threat. To my right sat Elena, my general counsel, her face set in a line of grim determination. To my left sat the director of human resources, present strictly for protocol. Across from us sat Dr. Grant Holloway. He was not here as a boyfriend or an ex. He was here as a witness and a partner in the St. Jude Providence contract. But the most important chairs were the 3 empty ones at the far end of the table. "They are in the lobby," Jonah messaged me on my tablet. "Security is escorting them up." I looked at Elena. "Do we have the full forensic report?" "We do," Elena said, tapping a thick stack of files. "And Violet, it is worse than we thought. The forensic team found the deleted emails from the server logs." "Show me," I said. Elena slid a single sheet of paper across the table. I read it, and for a moment, the sheer audacity took my breath away. It wasn't just that Tessa had tried to sell the Vantapulse roadmap to a competitor for cash. That would have been simple greed. This was delusional. 6 months ago, Tessa had applied for a job as a chief strategy officer at a rival biotech firm. In her cover letter, she had claimed she was the silent architect behind Cascadia Clinical Innovations. She had attached my stolen roadmap not as a product to sell, but as a portfolio piece, claiming she had written it. She didn't just want my money, she wanted my brain. She wanted to skin me and wear my achievements like a coat so she could feel important. "She actually thought she could do the job?" Holloway asked, reading the document over my shoulder. His voice was quiet, laced with a mixture of pity and disbelief. "She doesn't know the first thing about algorithmic bias or clinical compliance." "She thought she could fake it," I said, staring at the paper. "She thought being a CEO was just wearing nice clothes and telling people what to do. She never saw the work. She only saw the result." The double doors opened. My parents walked in first. They looked smaller than I remembered. My father, usually so boisterous and sure of his place as the patriarch, looked like he had shrunk inside his expensive coat. My mother was clutching her purse with white knuckles, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the panoramic view of the city, the awards on the shelves, the sheer, undeniable weight of my reality. And then came Tessa. She was not wearing the red velvet dress. She was wearing a gray sweater and jeans. She wore no makeup. Her eyes were swollen. For the first time in her life, she looked like a woman who had run out of lies. "Sit down," I said. It wasn't a request. They sat. My father couldn't meet my eyes. He looked at the table, at the glass of water, anywhere but at the daughter he had underestimated for a decade. "We are here to resolve the legal standing of the breach of confidentiality committed by Tessa Bell," Elena began, her voice professional and sharp. "This is a formal meeting. Minutes are being recorded." "Violet," my mother started, her voice trembling. "Is this necessary? Can't we just talk as a family?" "We are talking as a family," I said. "This is how this family talks now, with facts." I pushed the document toward Tessa. "We know about the job application to MedCore," I said. "We know you claimed you wrote the roadmap. We know you sent them my proprietary data as a writing sample." Tessa flinched. She reached for the paper, her hand shaking. She read it, and a flush of deep, humiliating scarlet rose up her neck. "I just wanted a chance," she whispered. "I thought if I could just get in the door, I could learn. I am smart. Violet, I am good with people. I could have done it." "You attempted to defraud a billion-dollar industry," Holloway said. He didn't sound angry anymore. He just sounded tired. "Tessa, you cannot fake surgery. And you cannot fake this. You promised them a roadmap you didn't understand. If they had hired you, you would have destroyed their company within a month. I just wanted to be like you, Tessa cried out, tears spilling over. I wanted Mom and Dad to look at me the way they look at the way they should look at someone who made it. I was tired of just being the pretty one. I wanted to be the powerful one. So you decided to steal my power instead of building your own, I said. I looked at my parents. This is the reality, I told them. Your daughter didn't just tell a few white lies to get a boyfriend. She committed corporate espionage. She committed fraud. In the eyes of the law, she is a criminal liability. My father closed his eyes. Are you going to send her to jail, Violet? The room went silent. I could hear the hum of the server banks in the distance. I held the power to destroy Tessa completely. One phone call to the district attorney, and she would be trading her designer jeans for an orange jumpsuit. I looked at her. She was terrified. She was broken. No, I said. The air rushed out of the room. My mother let out a sob of relief. I am not going to put you in prison, Tessa, I said. Because I do not need revenge. I have a company to run, and frankly, a trial would be a distraction I cannot afford. I nodded to Elena. She slid a thick document across the table. This is a binding settlement agreement, I explained. It states that you will return every digital file you stole. You will delete every copy. You will sign a strict non-disclosure agreement banning you from ever mentioning Cascadia, Vantapulse, or me in a professional capacity. You will retract your social media posts immediately. And if I don't? Tessa asked, her voice barely audible. Then the deal is void, I said. And the police report I have already drafted gets filed. This is your one chance. You walk away with a clean record, but you walk away with nothing else. No claims to my company, no claims to my money, no claims to my success. Tessa picked up the pen. She didn't argue. She didn't try to negotiate. She signed her name with a shaky hand. I am sorry, she whispered, pushing the paper back. Violet, I am so sorry. I know, I said, but apologies do not fix data breaches. Signatures do. I turned to my parents. And now, for you, I said. My father looked up. Violet, we are so ashamed. We had no idea. I have a question, I interrupted. And I need an honest answer. It is the only thing I ask of you. I leaned forward. If I had stayed the hospital administrator, I asked, if I was still the broke, struggling daughter you thought I was, would you have defended me against Tessa? Or did you only start caring about my feelings when you found out I was the one paying for your roof? My father opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother looked down at her hands. The silence stretched. It was painful. It was the sound of a worldview collapsing. My father started, his voice cracking. We let ourselves be dazzled by her. We thought she was the winner, so we backed her. We thought you were the one who needed to be managed. It was lazy. It was bad parenting. We loved the version of her that made us look good. And now? I asked. Now we realize, my mother said softly, that the version of you that made us look good was the one we ignored. We loved the success. Violet, we are trying to love the daughter, but we don't know her anymore. It was a brutally honest answer. It hurt, but it was real. At least that is the truth, I said. I can work with the truth. I stood up. The agreement is signed, I said. Jonah will escort you out. Tessa, the tech team is waiting in the lobby to wipe your phone and laptop. Violet, Tessa said, standing up. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. How do I fix this, my life? It is actually a mess now. I have no boyfriend. I have no job. I have nothing. You fix it by starting over, I said. You get a real job, entry level. You work hard. You stop trying to be a star and start trying to be a person. I walked around the table and stood in front of her. You can fix broken by being honest, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Not by making me a mess so you can feel clean. Build your own life, Tessa. Stop trying to steal mine. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Okay, okay. Jonah opened the door. My family walked out. They walked slowly, stripped of their pretenses, carrying the heavy weight of a second chance they barely deserved. When the door closed, only Grant Holloway remained. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city. "You were kind," he said. "Kinder than I would have been." "She is my sister," I said. "I don't want to destroy her. I just want to stop her." "Well, you stopped her," he said. He turned to me. "And you saved me. If I had married her, if I had taken that money she promised." "You would have been beholden to a ghost," I said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a pen, an expensive silver fountain pen. "I believe we have a contract to sign," he said. "The St. Jude Providence Board approved the pilot program this morning. $15 million. Immediate deployment." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in days. "Let's sign it," I said. We sat at the table, the ghost of my family drama fading into the background. We signed the papers. It was just ink on paper, but it represented thousands of patients who would be monitored, protected, and saved. "Done," he said, capping the pen. "Congratulations, Ms. Bell." "Thank you, Dr. Holloway." He hesitated. "About us. I mean, not us, but the situation. I am sorry I was part of the problem." "You were the catalyst," I said. "You didn't cause the crack in the foundation. Grant, you just stepped on the floorboard that was already rotten. You did me a favor." He nodded. "I'm going to focus on the work. I think I'm done with dating for a while. I need to recalibrate my radar for truth." "That sounds like a wise plan," I said. He offered his hand. I shook it. It was a warm, solid grip. "See you at the implementation meeting on Monday," he said. "Monday." I agreed. He left. I was alone in the office. The silence returned. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was spacious. It was the silence of a room that had been cleared of clutter. I walked to my desk and sat down. I looked at the nameplate, Violet Bell, CEO. It meant something different now. Before, it was a secret shield. Now, it was just a fact. The sun began to set, casting long, orange shadows across the floor. The city lights flickered on, a grid of amber and white. My phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was a text from my father. "Dad, we are driving home. It is quiet in the car. Your mother and I want to learn. We want to know who you actually are, not who we wanted you to be. Can we take you to dinner next week? Somewhere simple, no expectations, just listening." I looked at the message. I could have said no. I could have cut them off and lived my life in my ivory tower, perfectly justified in my isolation. But Vantapulse was built on the idea that early detection can save a life. Maybe, just maybe, we had caught the rot in my family just in time to save the patient. I typed my reply. "Violet, I will talk. We can do dinner. But from now on, no one is allowed to call my life a mess anymore." I hit send. I set the phone down and turned back to my computer. The screens were glowing. The data was streaming. The world was messy, chaotic, and full of errors. But in this room, on this day, everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Violet Bell and her journey from the shadows to the spotlight. It is a reminder that the best revenge is not destruction, but undeniable success and the courage to live your truth. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening to this story from right now? Are you at work, at home, or maybe on a drive? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts on how Violet handled her family. Did she do the right thing by sparing Tessa, or should she have gone harder? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that their worth is not defined by anyone else's opinion. Stay strong, and see you in the next story.